So we got about 10 minutes left on the Squared Circle Psychobabble, so it's time for Swerve Me Wrong. I have 10 minutes to convince Ralph here of the popular opinion that Evolution is not the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018. So we have 10 minutes on the clock. It starts now. So it was a great pay-per-view. No doubt about it. We had some iconic matches. In fact, Dave Meltzer, we already talked about it, said that Becky versus Charlotte was the best match, women's match, I should say, in WWE history, giving it 4 3/4 stars. But if you look at this card and compare it to SummerSlam 2018, I think SummerSlam 2018 still has the better show. Yes, it was 5 hours long, but to me, that 5 hours was really not that, it didn't feel like 5 hours like the typical pay-per-view of WWE has this year. Like it felt long. SummerSlam didn't do that for me. And you could take the battle royal that happened at Evolution, take it out. I thought it was a train wreck. I liked the ending as the match progressed, it got better, but it was such a train wreck in the beginning. I'd rather see the 3 squash matches that we got at SummerSlam over that battle royal. And you had some other great matches. You had AJ versus Samoa Joe. Yes, the finish was kind of bad, but still a good match nonetheless. I still liked Roman versus Brock, the main event. I know we talked about that in a Swerve Me Wrong before. I liked that main event. The triple threat match for the women's championship on SmackDown was probably Carmella's best match since she's been on the main roster. And Seth Rollins versus Dolph Ziggler for the Intercontinental Championship was a great way to start the show. So while Evolution was still a great show, it was not the best show of 2018. SummerSlam was.
So I disagree. I think Evolution was a great pay-per-view, not just by, traditional women wrestling standards, which previously we know that, women's wrestling for what it was back then, it was really just kind of, it was there. They had a bunch of beautiful women in the matches. For the guys, pretty unfortunately just to look at, it was eye candy.
Right.
Now they're given the
panties matches.
Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, now they're given the opportunity to actually go out there and legitimately compete, and they surpassed all expectations. And I do think this was a great pay-per-view, not just by women's wrestling standards, but in all of wrestling standards. I do believe that this was the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018 to date. NXT Brooklyn, I think, was better, but strictly WWE, I thought this was better than SummerSlam. The reason I say that is the collective matches that were not only crowd-pleasing, but either good to very good to great. There was a handful of them. One of the things that WWE did not do with this pay-per-view that I thought really helped out a lot was they gave the wrestlers time. They let them tell stories. They all had time to tell the story where, you just mentioned it in some of the matches at SummerSlam, some of the matches felt a little rushed. Like, to me, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns was too short of a match for a main event.
But that was more because they wanted to end the show on a high note and
I get
cut
why
it
they
quick,
did it.
and they wanted to prevent the booze and the hijacking and all that stuff.
Right.
And even so, the way it was executed, I still like that. It was still only 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Fine. Crap on it all you want, but it served its purpose. Ronda Rousey versus Alexa Bliss, it was a 4-minute squash. Still served its purpose and did well. I actually liked the Ronda versus Nikki match a lot better than I thought I did.
Yeah.
And I also liked the 6-woman tag a lot better than I thought I did. But when you look at all the matches that SummerSlam offered, there weren't really any dud matches. Like, oh my God, this is such a crappy match. There were squashes and people didn't like that. That's one thing. But the matches that actually were given time, the Seth versus Ziggler was 22 minutes. Samoa Joe versus AJ was 22 minutes. Daniel Bryan versus The Miz was the longest match of the night at 23 minutes. There wasn't really anything that was like boring.
Yeah, so it was good. SummerSlam was good to a certain extent, depending on who you ask. But there were no really great moments. To me, Becky Lynch and Charlotte was great. That was the best match, I think, of 2018 as far as, wrestling is considered. Again, not just women's wrestling. And it's just wrestling standards in general. So do you think that that's the best match of 2018 to this point?
Becky versus Charlotte?
Yes.
Probably. It's definitely in the top 5. I don't know
Okay.
if I would call it the best yet. It was by far the best women's match I've
Right.
ever seen.
And back to what I was saying originally. So that was a great match. And then you had a lot of really good to good matches to follow that. So, or to complement it. So you had Shayna Baszler versus Kairi Sane, which I thought was very good. Storm versus Shirai, which I thought was very good. Ronda and Nikki was a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
I could agree with that.
It was crowd pleasing. The crowd was into it, and it delivered to a certain extent. The Battle Royal, there were some spots that weren't very good. But ultimately, I thought the ending was done well. You got a cool moment with Asuka and Ember Moon.
Yes.
So that's why I think Evolution was just a step ahead of anything else that WWE has presented to date, because the collective matches, this was a big moment in wrestling history, right? The first
Yes.
time ever you were going to have women, a truly entire pay-per-view that's just dedicated to women's wrestling.
Right.
And to me, they all blew it out of the water. They all showed up and they delivered. And to me, collectively, all the matches put together were better than any other full pay-per-view that WWE has presented to date.
So why don't we do this? Let's take the top 5 matches of SummerSlam and compare it to the 5 that you just mentioned of Evolution. So that would be Seth and Dolph Ziggler for the Intercontinental Championship. I would say Charlotte, Becky, and Carmella for the Women's Championship. AJ versus Joe. Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. And I guess Brock and Lesnar was the 5th best. And yes, it was a 6-minute match, but I really enjoyed the high action, high urgency, and the story that was told in the limited amount of time that it had. I enjoyed that. Daniel Bryan and The Miz was still a 4 to 5 star match. Maybe it didn't fully deliver like people intended, but I still
that
thought
was
it
tough because the crowd wasn't into it
the
for
crowd,
whatever reason.
Right. Well, it was right after Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, which they had a huge reaction for when Samoa Joe had the promo and AJ finally snapped.
That match was about to be great, and the ending, unfortunately, just wasn't
right. But then Charlotte and Becky, we got the heel turn that we have expected from Becky Lynch, and that could be the moment where if Becky Lynch doesn't do that, this pay-per-view might not have us talking about this right now, because you're not seeing Becky versus Charlotte in the last woman standing match and not seeing Becky Lynch as red hot as she is right now on SmackDown.
What was the best match of SummerSlam, in your opinion?
I would probably say AJ versus Samoa Joe.
And you would say would you say Becky and Charlotte was better only because it had a definitive ending, or do you think?
No. I think it was definitely the better match.
Those two are even. What do you think the second best was? The women's?
I would say Daniel Bryan versus The Miz.
Okay.
Was number 2.
And do you think Baszler, Insane, or Storm and Shirai were better than that, or even?
At least even. I don't know if I would definitely say better, but it was at least even. I would actually, you know what? I would say it was slightly better than those two. Storm and Shirai was a good match, and it was a good 15 minutes, but I honestly did not like the suplex spot on the apron. I'm not a fan of apron spots.
I thought that was great.
I was not a fan of I'm not a fan of apron spots. And kudos to Renee Young, by the way, who said, that's the hardest part of the ring. Why is she doing that? Thank you for finally acknowledging that on TV. But the next match after that, I would say, was the triple threat match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. So that was Charlotte versus Becky versus Carmella. I thought that was, like I said, Carmella's best match since she's been on the the SmackDown roster. And I think that one was slightly better than the 6-women tag of Sasha, Natalya, Bayley versus the Riot Squad.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is this. 10 years from now, I don't think people are going to look back at that SummerSlam and say, wow, you know what, that was great. There wasn't that big moment or that one match that really left you being like, wow, I'm going to remember this for 10 years from now. I do think 10 years from now, people will still talk about Becky versus Charlotte.
I agree.
Not only because it was, the first women's pay-per-view and it was a great match, but because it would have been a great match whether it was WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, or Evolution. Mm-hmm. So I think having that historic match, wherever it would have been, whether it's Evolution or WrestleMania, and the rest of the matches collectively put Evolution slightly ahead of anything else WWE has presented so far. That's my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, both do have their strong cases of being the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018. Let us know what you think by tweeting us, posting us on Facebook, going to Instagram. We're at SCPB Podcast. You could subscribe on YouTube. Smash that subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast provider, make sure you subscribe and review, because that's how we get noticed here in the world of podcasting. And without you, we're just doing this to nobody.
Give us some love, fuckers.
If you'd like this segment of the Squared Circle Psychobabble, listen to the full episode by clicking the link in the description below. And make sure you subscribe and review on your favorite podcast provider. Hit subscribe and the bell for notifications for more videos. And follow us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast.